Hello, reading room. We are here in the classroom. Specifically, this is the reading room. It is February 24th, and it is day 315 in the classroom. Let's go ahead and get to it. This has gotten me, and I forgot to talk to my son about this, but he ran out of the house. I'm pretty sure his car was still running yesterday, my son. Without having that discussion with him, which was about seriously wanting to, spend my time trying to use my skills to heal kids. But I know that was always the plan. And so I'm hoping that they did all their work that they could. Okay. Spruce Harbor, Maine, 2011. Spring at last, Ralph beams, pulling on work gloves in the kitchen while Molly pours herself a bowl of cereal. It does not feel like spring today, real spring, with leafy trees and blooming daffodils. Air so warm you don't need a sweater. Here I go, he says, heading outside to clear brush. Working in the yard is Ralph's favorite activity. He likes to weed, to plant, to cultivate. All winter, he's been like a dog scratching the door, begging to go out. Dina, meanwhile, is watching HGTV and painting her toenails on the living room couch. When Molly comes into the living room with her Raisin Bran, she looks up and frowns. Something I can do for you? She jabs the tiny brush into the coral bottle, wipes the excess under the rim, and expertly strokes the polish on her big toe, correcting the line with her thumb. No food in the living room, remember? Good morning to you, too. Without a word, Molly turns and heads back to the kitchen where she speed dials Jack. Hey, his voice is cool. What are you up to? Vivian's paying me to do a spring cleanup of her property, get rid of dead branches and all that. You? I'm heading over to Bahaba, to the library. I have a research project due in a few days. I was hoping you'd come with me. Sorry, can't, he says. Ever since their exchange at lunch last week, Jack's been like this. Molly knows it is taking great effort on his part to hold this grudge. It runs so counter to his personality, and though she wants to apologize to make things right between them, she's afraid that anything she says now will ring hollow. If Jack knows she's been interviewing Vivian, that cleaning the attic has morphed into this ongoing conversation, he'll be even more pissed off. She hears a whisper in her head. Leave well enough alone. Finish your hours and be done with it. But she can't leave well enough alone. She doesn't want to. The Island Explorer is nearly empty. The few passengers greet each other with a nod as they get on. With their earbuds in, Molly knows she looks like a typical teenager, but what she's actually listening to is Vivian's voice. On the tape, Molly hears things she didn't when Vivian was sitting in front of her. Time constricts and flattens, you know. It's not evenly weighted. Certain moments linger in the mind of others disappear. The first 23 years of my life are the ones that shaped me, and the fact that I've lived almost 7 decades since then is irrelevant. Those years have nothing to do with the questions you ask. Molly flips open her notebook, runs her finger down the names and dates she's recorded. She plays the tape backward and forward, stops and starts, scribbles down identifiers she's missed. Kinvara, County Galway, Ireland. The Agnes Pauline, Ellis Island, the Irish Rose, Delancey Street, Elizabeth Street, Dominic James, Macy Power, the Children's Aid Society, Mrs. Scatcherd, Mr. Curran. What did you choose to take with you? What did you leave behind? What insights did you gain? Vivian's life has been quiet and ordinary. As the years passed, her losses piled one on another like layers of shale. Even if her mother lived, she would be dead now. The people who adopted her are dead. Her husband is dead. She has no children, except for the company of the women she pays to take care of her. She is as alone as a person can be. She has never tried to find out what happened to her family, her mother, or her relatives in Ireland, but over and over, Molly comes to understand as she listens to the tapes. Vivian has returned to the idea that the people who matter in our lives stay with us, haunting our most ordinary moments. They're with us in the grocery store as we turn a corner, chat with a friend. They rise up through the pavement. We absorb them through our souls. That soul is spelled S-O-L-E. Vivian has given Molly's community service sentence meaning. Now Molly wants to give something back. No one else knows Vivian's story. There's no one to read the documents of indenture of adoption, no one to acknowledge the significance of the things she values, things that would be meaningful only to someone who cares about her. But Molly cares. The gaps in Vivian's stories seem to her mysteries she can help solve. On TV once she heard a relationship expert say that you can't find peace until you find all the pieces. She wants to help Vivian find some kind of peace, elusive and fleeting as it may be. After being dropped off at the Bar Harbor Green, Molly walks over to the library, a brick structure on Mount Desert Street. In the main reading room, she chats with the reference librarian who helps her find a cache of books on Irish history and immigration in the 1920s. She spends a few hours poring over them and jotting notes. Then she pulls out her laptop and launches Google. Different words together yield different results, so Molly tries dozens of combinations. 1929 fire NYC, Lower East Side, Elizabeth Street fire, 1929, Agnes Pauline, Ellis Island, 1927. On the Ellis Island website, she clicks passenger records search. She clicks passenger records search. Searched by ship. Now click the name of a ship from the list below. And here it is, the Agnes Pauline. She finds Vivian's parents' full names in the passenger records log. Patrick and Mary Power from County Galway, Ireland, and feels a vertiginous thrill as if fictional characters have suddenly sprung to life. Searching the names separately and together, she finds a small notice about the fire, noting the deaths of Patrick Power and his sons Dominic and James. There's no mention of Macy. She types Mary Powers, then Macy Power, nothing. She has an idea. Scatsman, Elizabeth Street, NYC, Scatsman, Elizabeth Street, 1930. A reunion blog pops up. Eliza Schatzman organized a family reunion in 2010 in upstate New York. Under the family history tab, Molly finds a sepia-toned picture of Agneta and Bernard Schatzman, who emigrated from Germany in 1915, resided at 26 Elizabeth Street. He worked as a vendor and she took in mending. Bernard Schatzman was born 1894 and Agneta in 1897. They had no children until 1929 when he was 35 and she was 32. Then they adopted a baby, Margaret Macy. Molly sits back in her chair. I just couldn't imagine what it would be like, right? So Macy didn't die in the fire. Less than 10 minutes after beginning her search, Molly is looking at a year-old photograph of a woman who must be Vivian's white-haired baby sister, Margaret Reynolds, née Schatzman, age 82, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren at her home in Rhinebeck, New York, 2.5 hours from New York City and just over 8 hours from Spruce Harbor. She types in Margaret Reynolds, Rhinebeck, New York. An obituary notice from the Poughkeepsie Journal pops up. It's 5 months old. Mrs. Raymond Reynolds, age 83, died peacefully in her sleep on Saturday after a short illness. She was surrounded by her loving family, lost and found, and lost again. Woo! How will she ever tell Vivian? Hemingford, Minnesota, 1930. Can you back off a little bit? Thanks. When I get better, I ride to school with Miss Larson in the black car. Mrs. Murphy gives me something new nearly every day. A skirt she says she found in a closet, a wooden hat, a camel-colored coat, a periwinkle scarf, and matching mittens. Some of the clothes have missing buttons or small rips and tears, and others need hemming or taking in. When Mrs. Murphy finds me mending a dress with the needle and thread Fanny gave me, she exclaims, "Why, you're as handy as a pocket in a shirt." The food she makes, familiar to me from Ireland, evokes a flood of memories. Sausages roasting with potatoes in the oven and tea leaves in Graham's morning coupa. Laundry flapping on the line behind the house, the faint clang of the church bell in the distance. Graham sang, "Now that was the goat's toe," after a satisfying supper, and other things. Quarrels between Mam and Graham. Madame passed out drunk on the floor. Mam's cry, "You spoiled him rotten, and now he'll never be a man." And Graham's retort, "You keep pecking at him, and soon he won't come home at all. You keep a pecking, and I'll keep a..." Those are from cartoons, sorry. Cartoon break! Sometimes when I stayed overnight at Graham's, I'd overhear my grandparents whispering at the kitchen table. What are we to do about it then? Will we have to feed that family forever? I knew they were exasperated with Da, but they had little patience for Mam, either whose people were from Limerick and never lifted a finger to help. But they knew how to rhyme. Mrs. Murphy gestures toward the rose velvet sofa, and he sits down heavily like an elephant I once saw in a picture book, his large stomach protruding from rounded thighs. Miss Larson and I sit in the wingback chairs. When Mrs. Murphy disappears into the kitchen, he leans forward and smirks. Neve again. Are you? I don't know. I glance out the window at the street dusted with snow and Mr. Sorensen's dark green truck that I somehow hadn't noticed earlier parked in front of the house. The vehicle, more than his presence, makes me shudder. It's the same one I rode into the Groats, with Mr. Sorensen gabbing cheerfully the whole way. "Let's go back to Dorothy, shall we?" he says, easier. Miss Larson looks at me and I shrug. All right. He clears his throat. Why don't we get to it? He pulls his small glasses out of the breast pocket, puts them on, and holds a paper out at arm's length. There have been 2 failed attempts at placing out, the Burns and the Groats. Trouble with the woman in the house in both places. He looks at me over the top of his silver rims. I must tell you, Dorothy, it's beginning to appear that there's some kind of problem with you. But I didn't. He waves his sausage fingers at me. The predicament you must understand is that you are an orphan, and that whatever the reality, it looks as if there may be an issue with insubordination. Now, there are several ways to proceed. First, of course, we can send you back to New York, or we can attempt to find another home, he sighs heavily, which, to be frank, may prove difficult. Mrs. Murphy, who has been in and out of the room with her cabbage rose tea service and is now pouring tea into delicate, thin-rimmed cups, sets the teapot on a trivet in the middle of the polished coffee table. She hands Mr. Sorensen a cup and offers him the sugar bowl. Marvelous, Mrs. Murphy, he says, and dumps 4 spoons of sugar into his cup. He adds milk, stirs it noisily, rests the small silver spoon on the rim of his saucer, and takes a long slurp. See, that's the beginning of the narrative then. And that's what would be in the files, that she's insubordinate. It's just really despicable. Mr. Sorensen, Mrs. Murphy says when his cup is back in its resting place, a thought occurs. May I speak with you in the foyer? Why, certainly. He wipes his mouth with a pink napkin and gets up to follow her into the hall. When the door closes behind them, Miss Larson takes a sip of tea and places her cup back on its saucer with a little rattle. The brass lamp on the round table between us emits an amber glow. I'm sorry you have to go through this, but I'm sure you understand that Mrs. Murphy, generous-hearted as she is, can't take you in indefinitely. You do understand, don't you? Yes, there's a lump in my throat. I don't trust myself to say any more. When Mrs. Murphy and Mr. Sorensen come back into the room, she fixes her steady gaze on him and smiles. You are quite a fortunate girl, he tells me. This extraordinary woman, he beams at Mrs. Murphy, and she lowers her eyes. Mrs. Murphy has brought to my attention that a couple named the Nielsen's, friends of hers, own the general store on Center Street. 5 years ago, they lost their only child. Diphtheria, I believe it was, poor thing, Mrs. Murphy adds. Yes, tragedy, Mr. Sorensen says. Well, apparently they've been looking for help with the shop. Mr. Nielsen contacted Mrs. Murphy several weeks ago, asking whether any young woman in residence was seeking employment, and then you washed up on her doorstep, perhaps seeing that this characterization of how I got here might be perceived as insensitive, he chuckles. Forgive me, Mrs. Murphy, a figure of speech. Quite all right, Mr. Sorensen. We understand you meant no harm by it. Mrs. Murphy pours more tea into his cup and hands it to him, then turns to me. After speaking with Miss Larson about your situation, I told Mrs. Nielsen about you. I said that you are a sober-minded and mature, almost 11-year-old girl, that you have impressed me with your ability to sew and clean, and that I have no doubt you could be of use to her. I explained that while adoption may be the most desirous eventual result, it is not expected. She clasps her hands together, and so Mr. and Mrs. Nielsen have agreed to meet with you. I know I'm expected to respond, to express gratitude, but it takes a conscious effort to smile and several moments to form the words. I am not grateful. I am bitterly disappointed. I don't understand why I need to leave, why Mrs. Murphy can't keep me if she thinks I'm so well-mannered. I don't want to go into another home where I'm treated like a servant, tolerated only for the labor I can provide. That is the thing right there. That's key. Nobody should be set up to believe that they are getting free labor, because then they will treat that child who needs a parent as an employee. And if that child doesn't perform to the level that an employer looks for, will be violated, will be abused. How kind of you, Mrs. Murphy, Miss Larson exclaims, plunging into the silence. That's wonderful news, isn't it, Dorothy? Yes, thank you, Mrs. Murphy, I say, choking out the words. You're quite welcome, child, quite welcome. She beams proudly. Now, Mr. Sorensen, perhaps you and I should attend this meeting as well. Mr. Sorensen drains his teacup and sets it in its saucer. Indeed, Mrs. Murphy, I am also thinking that the two of us should meet separately to discuss the finer points of this transaction. What would you say to that? Mrs. Murphy blushes and blinks. She shifts in her chair, picks up her teacup, and then puts it down without taking a sip. Yes, that's probably wise, she says, and Miss Larson looks over and gives me a smile. Hemingford, Minnesota, 1930. Over the next few days, every time I see her, Mrs. Murphy has another suggestion for how I should comport myself on meeting the Nielsen's. A firm handshake, but not a squeeze, she says, passing me on the stairs. You must be ladylike. They need to know that you can be trusted behind the counter, she lectures at dinner. The other women chime in. Don't ask questions, one advises, but answer them without hesitation, another adds. Make sure your fingernails are clipped and groomed. Clean your teeth just before with baking soda. Your hair must be... Miss Grun grimaces and reaches up to her own head as if putting down soap bubbles. Tamed. You never know how they might feel about a redhead, especially that tinny shade. Now, Miss Larson says, we're going to scare the poor girl so much she won't know how to act. On the morning of the meeting, a Saturday in mid-December, there is a light knock on my bedroom door. It's Mrs. Murphy holding a navy blue velvet dress on a hanger. Let's see if this fits, she says, handing it to me. I'm not sure whether to invite her in or close the door while I change, but she solves this dilemma by bustling in and sitting on the bed. Mrs. Murphy is so matter-of-fact that I am not ashamed to take my clothes off and stand there in my knickers. She removes the dress from the hanger, unzips a seam at the side and that I hadn't realized was a zipper, and lifts it over my head, helping me with the long sleeves, pulling down the gathered skirt, zipping it up again. She steps back in the small space to inspect me, yanks at one side and then the other, tugs at a sleeve. Let's see about this hair, she says, instructing me to turn around so she can take a look. Fishing in her apron pocket, she pulls out bobby pins and a hair clip. For the next few minutes, she pokes and prods, pulling the hair back from my face and smoothing it into submission. When she's finished to her satisfaction, she turns me around to look at my reflection in the glass. Despite my trepidation about meeting the Nielsen's, I can't help smiling. For the first time, Mr. Grove butchered my hair months ago. I look almost pretty. I have never worn a velvet dress before. It is heavy and a little stiff, with a full skirt that falls in a lush drape to my midcalf. It gives off a faint scent of mothballs whenever I move. I think it's beautiful, but Mrs. Murphy isn't satisfied. Narrowing her eyes at me and clicking her tongue, she pinches the material. Wait a minute, I'll be right back, she says, hurrying out and returning in a few moments later with a wide black ribbon. Turn around, she instructs, and when I do, she loops the sash around my waist and ties it in the back with a wide bow. We both inspect her handiwork in the mirror. There we are. You look like a princess, my dear, Mrs. Murphy declares. Are your black stockings clean? I nod. Put them on, then, and your black shoes will be fine, she laughs, her hands on my waist. A redhead Irish princess you are, right here in Minnesota. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, in the early hours of the first heavy snowstorm of the season, I greet Mr. and Mrs. Nielsen, Mrs. Murphy's parlor, and Mr. Sorensen and Miss Larson standing by. Mr. Nielsen resembles a large gray mouse, complete with twitching whiskers, pink-tinged ears, and a tiny mouth. He is wearing a gray three-piece suit and a silk-striped bow tie, and he walks with a black cane. Mrs. Nielsen is thin, almost frail. Her dark head of hair, streaked with silver, is pulled back in a bun. She has dark eyebrows and eyelashes and deep-set brown eyes, and her lips are stained dark red. She wears no powder or rouge on her olive skin. Mrs. Murphy puts the Nielsens at ease, plying them with tea and biscuits and inquiring about their short trip across town in the snow, and then remarking generally on the weather, how the temperature dipped in the past few days and snow clouds gathered slowly to the west, how the storm finally began today as everyone knew it would. They speculate about how much snow we are bound to get tonight, how long it will stay on the ground, when we might expect more snow, and what kind of winter it will be. Surely it won't rival the winter of 1922, when ice storms were followed by blizzards and nobody could get any relief. That's a question. Ours was 1972. Or the Black Dust Blizzard of 1923. Remember that? 1972, 1973. When dirty snow blew down from North Dakota, 7-foot snow drifts covered entire sections of the city, and people didn't leave their houses for weeks. On the other hand, there's little chance that it will be as mild as 1921, the warmest December on record. The Nielsens are politely curious about me, and I do my best to answer their questions without sounding either desperate or apathetic. The other three adults watch us with a quivering intensity. I sense them urging me to do well, to sit up straight and answer in complete sentences. Finally, as one conversational theme after another runs its course, Mr. Sorensen says, "All right then, I believe we all know why we are here, to determine whether the Nielsens might be willing to provide Dorothy with a home and whether Dorothy is suitable to their needs. To that end, Dorothy, can you tell the Nielsens why you wish to become part of their household and what you might bring to it yourself?" If I am honest, which is not, of course, what Mr. Sorensen is asking of me, I will say that I simply need a warm, dry place to live. I want enough food to eat, clothes and shoes that will protect me from the cold. I want calmness and order. More than anything, I want to feel safe in my bed. I can sew. I'm quite neat. I'm good with numbers, I say. Mr. Nielsen, turning to Mrs. Murphy, asks, "And can the young lady cook and clean? Is she hardworking?" "Is she a Protestant?" Mrs. Nielsen adds. "She is a hardworking girl, I can attest to that," Mrs. Murphy says. "I can cook some things, I tell them. Though at my previous residence, I was expected to make stew out of squirrels and raccoons, and I'd rather not do that again." "Mercy, no," Mrs. Nielsen says. "And the other question? I'm barely keeping up. Do you go to church, dear?" Mrs. Murphy prompts. "Oh, right. The family I lived with were not church-going people," I answer honestly, though in truth I have not been to church since the chapel at the Children's Aid Society, and before that only with Graham. I remember clasping her hand as we walked to St. Joseph's, right at the center of Kinvara, a small church made of stone with jewel-toned stained glass windows and dark oak pews. The smell of incense and lilies, the candles lit for loved ones passed away, the throaty intonations of the priest, and the majestic trumpeting of the organ My da said he was allergic to religion and never did anybody any good. And when ma'am got grief from the neighbors on Elizabeth Street about not going to services, she'd say, "You try packing up a swarm of kids on a Sunday morning when one has a fever, one has the colic, and your husband's passed out in the bed." I remember watching other Catholics, girls in their communion dresses and boys in their spit-shine shoes, walking down the street below our apartment, their mothers pushing prams and fathers strolling along beside. "She's an Irish girl, Viola, so I suspect she's Catholic," Mr. Nielsen says to his wife. I nod. "You may be a Catholic child," Mr. Nielsen says, the first thing he has said to me directly, "but we are Protestant, and we will expect you to go to Lutheran services with us on Sundays." "What does it matter?" "Yes, of course. And you should know that we will send you to school in town here, a short walk from our home, so you won't attend Miss Larson's classes any longer." Miss Larson says, "I believe Dorothy was about to outgrow the schoolhouse anyway. She's such a smart girl." And after school, Mr. Nielsen says, "You will be expected to help in the store. We'll pay you an hourly wage, of course. You know about the store, Dorothy, do you not?" "It's sort of a general interest, all-purpose place," Mrs. Nielsen says. I nod and nod and nod. So far, they've said nothing that raises an alarm, but I don't feel a spark of connection with them either. They don't seem eager to learn about me, but then again, a few people are. I get the sense that my abandonment and the circumstances that brought me to them matter little to them compared to the need I might fill in their lives. The following morning at 9 o'clock a.m., Mr. Nielsen pulls up in a blue and white Studebaker with silver trim and raps on the front door. Mrs. Murphy has been so generous that I now have 2 suitcases and a satchel filled with clothes and books and shoes, and I'm closing my bags. Miss Larson comes to my room and presses Anne of Green Gables into my hands. "It's my own book, not the school's, and I want you to have it," she says, hugging me goodbye. And then for the 4th time since I had first set foot in Minnesota over a year ago, everything I possess is loaded into a vehicle, and I am on my way to somewhere new. Hemmings Ford, Minnesota, 1930 to 1931. The Nielsen's home is a 2-story colonial painted yellow with black shutters and a long slate walkway leading to the front door. It sits on a quiet street several blocks from the center of town. Inside the floor plan is a circle. A sunny living room on the right leads into the kitchen in the back, which connects to a dining room and back to the foyer. Upstairs, I have my own large room painted pink with the window overlooking the street, and even my own lavatory with the porcelain sink and pink tiles and a cheerful white curtain with pink piping. Mr. and Mrs. Nielsen take things for granted that I've never dared to dream of. All the rooms have steel air vents with black painted scroll work. Even when no one is home, the water heater is on. When they come home after work, they don't have to wait for the house to warm. A woman named Bess cleans the house and does the washing once a week. The refrigerator is stocked with milk and eggs and cheese and juice, and Mrs. Nielsen notices that I like to eat and buys more of it. Oats for breakfast, for instance, and fruits, even exotic one like oranges and bananas. I find aspirin and store-bought toothpaste in the medicine cabinet and clean towels in the hall closet. Every 2 years, Mr. Nielsen tells me he trades in his car for a new model. On Sunday morning, we go to church. Grace Lutheran is different from any place of worship I've ever seen. A simple white building with a steeple, Gothic arched windows, oak pews, and a spare altar. I find the rituals comforting. The tried and true hymns, sermons by the mild-mannered, slope-shouldered reverend that emphasize decency and good manners. Mr. Nielsen and other parishioners grumble about the organist, who either plays so fast that we jumble the words or so slow that the songs become dirges. and he can't seem to take his foot off the pedal. But nobody actually protests. They just raise their eyebrows at each other mid-song and shrug. Oh my gosh, we used to do that with Mrs. Greer. Ah, for sure. I like the assumption that everyone is trying his best and we should all just be kind to each other. I like the coffee hour with almond cake and snickerdoodles in the vestry. And I like being associated with the Nielsen's, who seem to be generally regarded as fine, upstanding citizens. For the first time in my life, the glow of other people's approval extends to and envelops me. I also remember when we were going to church, when we first moved to Fremont, and we were in that small little house that we were renting before we got our new house, how we used to go to M&L Cafe, and they would have homemade donuts every morning. Dear Jesus, God in heaven, homemade warm donuts. If you got there at 6:30, they were warm. And my dad usually would, because he would get them before church so that we could eat them before church and then go to church. But I think he only did that if we went to 8 o'clock mass. Then when we started going to 10:30, we started doing it, but it was later and he didn't like it. And then we stopped that tradition. That was a shame because that was a really nice tradition. It was really nice, but there was nothing like those donuts. Later on, I worked as a waitress at M&L Cafe, and she was a bitch. Life with the Nielsen's is just like an old nun. Exactly. And I think she was actually, but whatever. Life with the Nielsen's is calm and orderly. Each morning at 5:30, 6 days a week, Mrs. Nielsen makes breakfast for her husband, usually fried eggs and toast, and he leaves for the store to open for the farmers at 6. I get ready for school and leave the house at 7:45 for the 10-minute walk to the schoolhouse. A brick building that holds 60 children separates into grades. On my first day in this new school, the 5th grade teacher, Miss Bushkowski, asks the 12 of us in her class to introduce ourselves and list 1 or 2 of our hobbies. I've never heard of a hobby, but the boy before me says playing stickball, and the girl before him says stamp collecting. So when the question comes to me, I say sewing. Lovely, Dorothy, Miss Bushkowski says. What do you like to sew? Clothes mostly, I tell the class. Miss Bushkowski smiles encouragingly. For the dolls? No, for ladies. Well, isn't that nice, she says in a too bright voice. And in that way, it becomes clear to me that most 10-year-olds probably don't sew clothes for ladies. And so I begin to adjust. The kids know I've come from somewhere else, but as time passes and with careful effort, I lose any trace of an accent. I note that the girls my age are wearing. I know what the girls my age are wearing and the style of their hair and the subject of their conversations, and I work hard to banish my foreignness to make friends and fit in. After school, at 3 o'clock, I walk directly to the store. Nielsen's is a large open space divided into aisles with a pharmacy in the back, a candy section up front, clothes, books, and magazines, shampoo, milk, and produce. My job is to stack shelves and help with inventory. When it's busy, I help out at the cash register. My place at the counter, I see longing in the faces of certain children, the ones who sidle into the store and linger in the candy aisle, eyeing the hard striped sticks with a fierce hunger I remember only too well. I ask Mr. Nielsen if I can use my own earnings to give a child a stick of penny candy now and then, and he laughs. Use your discretion, Dorothy. I won't take it out of your wages. Mrs. Nielsen leaves the store at 5 to start dinner. Sometimes I go home with her, and sometimes I stay and help Mr. Nielsen close up. He always leaves at 6. At dinner, we talk about the weather and my homework and the store. Mr. Nielsen is a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and conversations often include discussion of initiatives and plans for stimulating business in this unruly economy, as he calls it. Late at night, Mr. Nielsen sits in the parlor at his roll-top desk, going over the store ledgers, while Mrs. Nielsen prepares our lunches for the next day, tidies the kitchen, takes care of the household tasks. I help wash the dishes, sweep the floor. When chores are done, we play checkers or hearts and listen to the radio. Mrs. Nielsen teaches me to needlepoint while she's making intricately detailed pillows for the sofa. I work on the floral cover for a stool. One of my first tasks at the store is to help decorate for Christmas. Mrs. Nielsen and I bring boxes filled with glass balls and china ornaments and ribbons and strings of sparkling beads up from the storage room in the cellar. Mr. Nielsen has his 2 delivery boys, Adam and Thomas, drive to the outskirts of town to cut a tree for the window, and we spend an afternoon putting swags of greenery with red velveteen bows over the store entrance and decorating the tree, wrapping empty boxes in foil paper and tying them with flocked ribbon and silk cording. As we work together, Mrs. Nielsen tells me bits and pieces about her life. She is Swedish, though you wouldn't know it. Her people were dark-eyed gypsies who came to the Gothenburg from Central Europe. Her parents are dead, her siblings scattered. She and Mr. Nielsen have been married for 18 years, since she was 25 and he was in his early 30s. They thought they couldn't have children, but about 11 years ago, she got pregnant. On July 7th, 1920, their daughter, Vivian, was born. What is your birth date again, Dorothy? Mrs. Nielsen asks. April 21st. Carefully, she threads silver ribbon through the tree branches in the back, ducking her head so I can't see her face. Then she says, "You girls are almost the same age." What happened to her, I venture. Mrs. Nielsen has never mentioned her daughter before, and I sense that if I don't ask now, I may not get the chance. Mrs. Nielsen ties the ribbon to a branch and bends down to find another. She attaches the end of the new ribbon to the same branch to make it look continuous and begins the process of weaving it through. When she was sick, she developed a fever. We thought it was a cold. Put her to bed, called the doctor. She said we should let her rest, give her plenty of fluids, the usual advice, but she didn't get better, and next thing we knew, it was the middle of the night, and she was delirious, out of her mind really, and we called the doctor again, and he looked down her throat and saw the telltale spots. We didn't know what it was, but he did. We took her to St. Mary's Hospital in Rochester, and they quarantined her. When they told us there was nothing they could do, we didn't believe them, but it was just a matter of time. She shakes her head as if to clear her throat. That I think about it, how hard it must have been for her losing a daughter. I think of my brothers and Macy. We have a lot of sadness inside us, Mrs. Nielsen and I. I feel sorry for the both of us. This is amazing, isn't it? Isn't that just amazing? You know, this is why people don't like doctors. I was talking to my son about it, and you know, we grew up with the idea that if you had cancer, first of all, you're a mistake. You went to the doctor and they told you that. And second mistake, if they open you up, forget about it. You've got cancer all over the place. Now, I'm not saying that was medicine. I'm not saying it was evidenced. I'm saying it was popular culture. It was popular knowledge. And the fact that our stats support that kind of mentality does not lead us to believe otherwise. On Christmas Eve, in a soft snowfall, the three of us walked to church. We light candles on a 20-foot tree to the right of the altar. All the fair-haired Lutheran children and parents and grandparents singing with songbooks open. The Reverend preaching a sermon on elemental as a story in a child's picture book, a lesson about charity and empathy. People are in dire need, he tells the congregation. If you have something to give, give. Rise to your best selves. He talks about some families in crisis. Hog farmer John Slattery lost his right arm in a threshing accident. They need canned goods and any manpower you can spare while they try to salvage the farm. Mrs. Abel, 87 years old, blind now in both eyes and all alone. If you can see it in your heart to spare a few hours a week, it will be greatly appreciated. A family of 7, the Groats, in dire straits, the father out of work, 4 young children, and another born prematurely a month ago, now sickly, the mother unable to get out of bed. How sad, Mrs. Nielsen murmurs. Let's put together a package for the poor family. She doesn't know my history with them. They're just another distant calamity. After the service, we walk back through quiet streets. The snow has stopped and it's clear, and it's a clear, cold night. The gas lamp casts circles of light. As the three of us approach the house, I see it as if for the first time, the porch light shining, an evergreen wreath on the door, the black iron railing, a neatly shoveled walkway. Inside, behind a curtain, a lamp in the living room glows. It's a pleasant place to return. A home. Every other Thursday after supper, Mrs. Nielsen and I join Mrs. Murphy and 6 other ladies at a quilting group. We meet in a spacious parlor room, and the wealthiest lady in the group, who lives in a grand Victorian on the outskirts of town. I am the only child in a room full of women and am immediately at ease. We work together on one quilt, a pattern and fabric that a member of the group has brought in. As soon as that one is finished, we'll move to the next. Each quilt takes about 4 months to finish. This group, I learned, made the quilt on my bed in the pink bedroom. It's called Irish Wreath, 4 purple irises with green stems meeting in the middle on a black background. We'll make a quilt for you someday too, Dorothy, Mrs. Nielsen tells me. She begins to save cuttings from the fabric station in the store. Every scrap goes into a steamer trunk with my name on it. We talk about it at dinner. A lady bought 10.5 yards of a beautiful blue calico, and I saved the extra half yard for you. She'll say, I've already decided on the pattern, a double wedding ring, a series of interlocking circles made up of some rectangles with fabric. Once a month on Sunday afternoon, Mrs. Nielsen and I polish the silver from a deep drawer in the cabinet in the living room. She takes out a heavy mahogany box that contains the cutlery she was given by her mother as a wedding present. Her only inheritance, she tells me. Removing the pieces one by one, she lines them up on tea towels on the table while I gather 2 small silver bowls from the living room mantel, 4 candlesticks, and a serving platter from the sideboard, and a hinged box with her name, Viola, and a spidery script across the top from her bedroom. We use a heavy mud-colored paste in a jar, a few small stiff brushes, water, and lots of rags. One day, as I am polishing an ornately decorated serving spoon, Mrs. Nielsen points at her clavicle and says, without looking at me, we could clean that up for you if you like. I touch the chain around my neck, following it with my finger down the cladag. Reaching back with both hands, I unfasten the clasp. Use your brush, be gentle, she says. My gram gave this to me, I tell her. She looks at me and smiles. Warm water, too. As I work with the brush along the chain, it is transformed from a dull gray to a color of tinsel. The cladag charm, its details obscured by tarnish, becomes 3-dimensional again. There, Mrs. Nielsen says, when I've rinsed and dried the necklace and puts it on again. Much better. And though she doesn't ask anything about it, I know this is her way of acknowledging that she knows it holds meaning for me. One night at dinner, after I had been living in their house for several months, Mr. Nielsen says, "Dorothy, Mrs. Nielsen and I have something to discuss with you. I think Mr. Nielsen is going to talk about the trip they've been planning to Mount Rushmore." But he looks at his wife and she smiles at me, and I realize it's something else, something bigger. "When you first came to Minnesota, you were given the name Dorothy," she says. "Are you particularly fond of that name?" "Not particularly," I say, unsure where this is going. "You know how much our Vivian meant to us, don't you?" Mr. Nielsen says. I nod. Well, Mr. Nielsen's hands are flat on the table. "It would mean a lot to us if you would take Vivian's name. We consider you our daughter, not legally yet, but we are beginning to think of you that way, and we hope that you are beginning to think of us as your parents." They look at me expectantly. I don't know what to think. What I feel for the Nielsen's gratitude, respect, appreciation isn't the same as a child's love for her parents. Not quite, though what that love is, I'm not quite sure I can say. I'm glad to be living with this kind of couple whose quiet, self-effacing manner I'm coming to understand. I'm grateful that they took me in, but I am also aware every day of how different I am from them. They are not my people and never will be. I don't know how to feel either about taking their daughter's name. I don't know if I can bear the weight of that burden. "Let's not pressure her, Hank," turning to me. Mrs. Nielsen says, "Take the time you need and let us know. You have a place in our home, whatever you decide." Several days later, I am in the store stocking shelves in the canned food aisle when I hear a man's voice I recognize but can't place. I stack the remaining cans of corn and peas on the shelf in front of me, pick up the empty cardboard box, and stand slowly hoping to determine who it is without being seen. I got some fine piecework to barter if you're amiable," I hear a man say to Mr. Nielsen, standing behind the counter. Every day people come into the store with reasons why they can't pay, asking for credit or offering goods for trade. Every evening it seems Mr. Nielsen brings something home from a customer: a dozen eggs, soft Norwegian flatbread called lefse, a long knitted scarf. Mrs. Nielsen rolls her eyes and says, "Mercy," but she doesn't complain. I think she's proud of him for being kind-hearted and for having the means to be. "Dorothy," I turn around, and with a little shock I realize it's Mr. Byrne. His auburn hair is lank and unkempt, and his eyes are bloodshot. I wonder if he's been drinking. What is he doing here in the general store of a town 30 miles from his own? "Well, this is a surprise," he says. "You work here?" I nod. The owners, the Nielsens, took me in. Despite the February cold, sweat is trickling down Mr. Burns's temple. He wipes it away with the back of his hand. "So, you happy with them?" "Yes, sir." I wonder why he's acting so odd. "How's Mrs. Byrne?" I ask, trying to steer the conversation to pleasantries. He blinks several times. "You haven't heard?" "Pardon?" Shaking his head, he says, "She was not a strong woman, Dorothy. Couldn't take the humiliation. Couldn't bear to beg favors." "But what should I have done different? I think about it every day." His face contorts. "When Fanny left, it was the..." "Fanny left?" I don't know why I'm surprised, but I am. "A few weeks after you did. Came in one morning and said her daughter up in Park Rapids wanted her to live with them, and she decided to go. We'd lost everyone else, you know, and I think Lois couldn't bear the thought." He wipes his hand across his whole face as if trying to erase his features. "Remember the freak storm that blew through last spring? Late April it was? Well, Lois walked out into it and kept walking. They found her froze to death about 4 miles from the house." I want to feel sympathy for Mr. Byrne. I want to feel something, but I cannot. I'm sorry, I tell him, and I suppose I am sorry for him, for his tattered life, but I cannot muster any sorrow for Mrs. Byrne. I think of her cold eyes and perpetual scowl, her unwillingness to see me as anything more than a pair of hands, fingers holding a needle and thread. I am not glad she is dead, but I am not sorry she is gone. At dinner that evening, I tell the Nielsens I will take their daughter's name, and in that moment, my old life ends and a new one begins. Though I find it hard to trust that my good fortune will continue, I am under no illusions about what I've left behind. So when after several years the Nielsens tell me that they want to adopt me, I readily agree. I will become their daughter, though I never can bring myself to call them mother and father. Our affiliation feels too formal for that. Even so, from now on, it is clear that I belong to them. They are responsible for me and will take care of me. As time passes, my real family becomes harder and harder to remember. I have no photographs or letters or even books from that former life, only the Irish cross from my gram. And though I rarely take the claddagh off, as I get older, I can't escape the realization that the only remaining piece of my blood family comes from a woman who pushed her only son and his family out to sea in a boat, knowing full well she'd probably never see them again. And that's all we have for today, rolling with our 3 days on it is February 24th. It is day 315. I don't know how people cannot be just moved by these stories. And you know, I think about AI and their inability to be able to see. I mean, I'm not saying that my interactions doesn't have an ability. I just don't think that's AI. That's what I'm saying. To understand sarcasm and to understand a few other things, colloquiums, right? Things like that, things that we say, to understand that and also have very different meanings, like we talked about in Bookless Classroom, the Chinese ship's called Chinese junk. Now maybe that's junk, could be, likely so. Dr. Annette Feravich, thanks so much for joining me here in the classroom where we finish up with the reading room and impress ourselves with how many books we're reading. Thanks so much for joining me. Sorry to that person who expected that we would be past and all the way through the book when you started. We're live here in the reading room, and that is to help us really show you how our behaviors in active lives can bring forth a healthier mind, a healthier body, and a healthier spirit. Thanks so much for joining me.